quite a few home coffee roasters are starting to get excited about the popper from Sweet Maria's. Last week I did a review on this unit. You can check that video out. I also had quite a few comments sharing the experiences that people have had with this roaster. So I'm going to share some of that as well as do a roast with you here at the Virtual Coffee Lab, so stick around. All right, thanks for joining me today here at the Virtual Coffee Lab. Last week I did my first roast on the popper and I did it here on this video. You can check that out. It's in the playlist up in the corner. That was a really interesting learning experience. Since then, I've done a little bit of research online. Sweet Maria's has put out a couple of announcements or bulletins on this unit that we'll talk about. And today I'm hoping to do a medium light roast, a light medium light roast coffee. I'm not going to call it a light roast, but it's going to be on the lighter side in the medium range here with this popper. So we're going to talk about that and we'll do that roast together. But first I want to share some things that I learned about this popper, this roaster from Sweet Maria's. First is the temperature. Let's talk about temperatures for a second. Last week I mentioned that the dial was kind of ambiguous in that it didn't have any markings on it. So I want to make a little bit of a correction to my statement and then also let you know what some other people are doing. Sweet Maria's in their instructions does provide an example of a couple of different dials here that you can consider using. And so I didn't mention that, at least in my video I didn't mention that. Quite honestly, I think it would be nice to have some stickers already made up, but you can see on the roaster here that I have created my own little dial just by making a copy of this page, and then I took the paper, single page paper, and then I cut out the dial that's on here and I just taped it on. The other thing that I did was I got like a bread tie, kind of a small black wire with some plastic around it, and I slid it in the little notch where the marking is on the dial, on that little knob here to determine, you know, what position you're setting the roaster at. And then I also bent it to go upward so you can see it moving on the face of this paper. And that is going to make things a lot easier for me to see. I'm wearing glasses, so some of us don't have the greatest vision. And it's just a better way to be able to identify and mark your coffee. So I'm going to be doing that. Others have created their own range. One person said that they created a dial like this that went from 1 to 6. So you can create your own markings and then apply those. The other thing that I wanted to mention is the temperature range. Sweet Maria's put out a notice and it's on their library. It's kind of like their blog. And they mentioned that they discovered that on their temperature tests, when you got from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, the temperature didn't change. I didn't notice that on mine. You can actually see my video when I did the demo and the review. And I actually took a temperature with the laser gun and I got different temperature readings. So I'm thinking that maybe from unit to unit it might be different. I could be wrong. I guess I should probably do another test just to verify it, but I went through the testing process, let it run at each temperature for at least 15-20 seconds, and then went to the next o'clock position to take its temperature reading. So not quite sure what's going on with the temperatures. So I would say that the assumption is you'll need to, when you receive a roaster, if you're getting this roaster, you'll need to do your own test, find your own temperatures. Even on this dial, you might even want to have a temperature dial on here instead of the readings. The variation is where you're plugging this in and what kind of electrical system you have in your house. If you've got an older home, they are very specific in their instructions about wiring. It's going to vary from house to house. They don't want you to use an extension cord. They want you to plug right into an outlet, but you're still going to have a little bit different power for each of the o'clock positions. So just be aware of that and do your tests so that you can know what to expect when you begin to roast on this. So when you see my numbers and my positions on my dial, you have to look at that as kind of a generality, a basic concept of a position on the roaster. So yours, if you get one, might be a little different. So just be aware of that as well. The other thing that I noticed in the comments is that some people are putting probes in this, and I'm still on the fence about whether I would put a probe in this unit or not, because I guess I don't know enough about air roasting. You know, this is, some have called this a fluid bed roaster, and it's really not. It's a cyclone air roaster, which is a little different than a fluid bed roaster. But regardless, you have hot air blowing, and the probe is going to be right there. And so I'm not sure you're going to get a bean reading with the probe. You might be just getting an air reading with the probe. And I guess that's okay if, I guess we just need to know what it is we're measuring, whether it's the beans or the air. So I'm a little bit on the fence on that. Again, I'm sure I'll get comments from people. You guys, I'm a home roaster like you. I'm learning this unit, so I'm not making any commandments or decrees on how this works and operates, but I'm curious how the probe, how effective the probe really would be. For me, any of these manual type roasting systems, unless you've got good probe placement and you're using a drum roaster, then as far as trying to follow a profile, it might be pretty tough. I know I'll get a lot of comments on that, and that's fine. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying it might be a little tough to do that. All right, and the last thing is that after a few roasts, I found that a film started building up on the inside of this plastic lid. I used warm soap and water and a paper towel. I didn't want to use anything abrasive to scratch the inside of this, and it washed really clean. Very happy with the way that the roaster cleans up. Somebody else commented that the chaff collector gets clogged, and so the roaster builds up more heat. That very well could be. I didn't notice the side vents getting blocked. It's only the bottom vent. There's a vent down here where there could be some blockage, but I think that it's still able to breathe. There are some that are roasting with the lid completely off as well, and I haven't done that. Again, it's all personal choice. And then one other thing about the lid, what I found was the lid I mentioned was kind of fidgety, but ultimately you just have to make sure it sets all the way back on the back edge of here, and then it just snaps right in. So the lid fits on really great. All in all, this is really a very interesting roaster, and my biggest thing is consistent temperatures so that I can plan a roast. And replicate a roast too with this. All right, so we're going to roast at least one roast today, and it's going to be like I mentioned, a light to medium roast coffee, and then hopefully my plan is to be able to do a tasting here at the end of the roast. So let's get started. 100 grams of coffee. All right, set the roaster at 1230 and start the timer, and we'll see if 4 minutes gets this going. All right, let's take a look at the beans. Should have some movement, and we got some movement. Slow movement, a little bit of chaff coming off. And we're almost 1 minute into the roast. So I'm going to have to keep a watch on the timer, and I'm thinking I'm going to, once we get the dry end, I'm going to turn that dial to give me some more time so I'm not worried about it. So this roast profile that I'm using, I had several questions about how do I determine what roast profile to use for the coffee. That was one question that I had this week based on that last video. The other is, hey, I'm going to be doing a lighter, medium type of a roast, how is that going to be different than a medium or a dark roast as far as my profile goes? And so we're going to do that together in these different videos. On this video, on this roast, my intention is to accentuate some of the brightness of the coffee, the acidity that's in there, and so by having a middle phase that's a little bit longer than my 30% that I use for training wheels. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, we have 3 phases within the coffee roast process. The first phase is the dry phase. The second phase is the browning phase, and the third phase is the development phase. Each of these phases represents part of the process that coffee goes through when it's roasting. They call this the dry phase, but the reality is there's still moisture in the bean all the way into first crack, and even beyond. So we're going to have moisture loss continuing after dry end, but that's just the dry phase. That's what they call that, drying phase or dry phase. Let's take a look at the coffee. We are at 3 minutes right now, and we definitely have color change going on. And we hit dry end at just about 4 minutes. It's kind of hard with this air roaster. I'm not getting a perfectly consistently even color at dry. So I have some beans that are lighter, some beans that are darker, and I guess that's okay. I guess that's expected. Small roast chamber, I'm not quite sure exactly why it is. Maybe it's just the air instead of a drum roaster. If you've got thoughts on that, I'd like to hear that. Leave your comments, that would be great. I've learned something from it, I appreciate it. All right, so we are at almost 4 minutes. And I would say that that is dry. So we're going to mark that dry at 4 minutes. And that fits, that's consistent with what we did before. So we had a 4 minute dry, and now I'm going to turn up my time. All right, I don't have to worry about that at first crack, but at first crack, I'm going to watch my time again. Okay, so 4 minute dry, so our next target is going to be a little shy of the 7 minute mark on the stopwatch on the clock here, and that's my target for first crack. Let's check out the color. I may even have slowed it down a little bit. I forgot. Yeah, I did. I think I did. All right. We're at 5:30. And now I'm going to increase it to 1 o'clock. Definitely getting more bouncing. I might even put this to 110. There, 110. And let's see how we're doing here. Slow it down just a shade. That might be too much heat. I put it back to 1. Yeah, we're starting crack early. Outliers. And we're starting first crack at 6:25. So we started first crack a little earlier than I wanted to. I'm going to move my timer up just because. And I'm going to, so if that was at 6:25, yep. Oops, got the wrong sheet. 625, first crack, and that means that I'm going to want for, let's see, 625, still cracking, 725, I'm going to say 730, I'm going to go into the cool mode right as soon as cracking stops. Right now. All right, so I'm in the cool mode at 747. We'll see how that tastes when I actually brew it. I'm going to wait a couple days. I'll brew it, I'll record that, and I'll include that here in the video. So I'm still learning the roaster, still giving it a try. So this is very close to what I would call a standard roast profile for me for a medium, light to medium roast. But I really wanted to extend. I wanted that 31% browning phase to be 36%. And I didn't do that. So maybe next time I'll do that. But let's get to the tasting. We'll talk about that, and then I'll have my concluding comments. All right, the Guatemala Hue coffee that I roasted on the Sweet Maria's popper has had a chance to rest for 3 days, and I've gone ahead and brewed this coffee. But before I get into the tasting, I want to thank you guys for joining me today. If you are newer to this channel, hit the like button and also subscribe to this channel. The subscribing really helps me out a lot, helps this channel. I really do appreciate that. As far as the tasting goes, I've had this coffee a lot. The Guatemala Hue is a great coffee. I've had it on my drum roaster, the Be More, and the Hive, and I've had some great results. So I'm roasting this on the popper, so I know what I should expect from this coffee. We'll get to the taste here in just a second, but before I do, I want to share my phase times with you. I calculated all this out, and this is really important because this is going to help me understand what I need to change when I taste this coffee. 7 minutes and 47 seconds was my total roast time. Total roast time in seconds, by the way, is 467 seconds. So the dry phase was 240 seconds. That went from charge to 4 minutes. That was 51.4% of the total roast time. The 240 divided that by 467 seconds, and we got the 51.4%. All right, the brown phase is from 4 minutes through to first crack, which was began at 6:25. So that is a total of 2 minutes and 25 seconds. Converting that to seconds, that's 145 seconds. Divide that by the total roast time of 467 seconds, and that's 31%. So the middle phase, the browning phase, was 31%. The development phase went from first crack till the coffee was dropped, which is when we went to cool, and that was 82 seconds divided by 467 seconds, 18.5% development. So what we have is a 51.5, 31, 18.5 for my roast phase times. This is pretty close to what I have been promoting as like a starting point for you to figure out how to change, how to tweak your roasts. So we're going to go ahead and taste this coffee and see if it tastes anything like the coffees that I've roasted, the Guatemala Hue I roasted on the drum roaster, the Hive, and the Be More. I am getting a little bit of a spice aroma. I'm not really smelling any sort of fruit, and I am smelling a little bit of a syrupy sweetness, but it's faint. Okay, so what I'm getting from this, the first thing that I'm tasting is lemon. So it's a lemon acidity. So what that tells me, it's kind of tart. And so what that tells me is that the middle phase is too short. I need to lengthen the middle phase. The middle phase was 31%. So I think I'm getting a little bit of a, I am getting a little bit of an apple, but very, very minimal. And there's not a lot of sweetness. Okay, so I would definitely say that I need to shorten my dry phase. Shorten the time or shorten the percentage. That's something we need to figure out. Everybody online is telling me in the comments that I need to shorten my dry phase. So I'm probably going to shorten my dry phase. I'm going to lengthen the middle phase because, as I've mentioned in my videos on the how to roast sweet and flavorful coffee, that middle phase, that brown phase, is the time when all of these chain reactions are taking place to the molecules in the coffee. The heat is transforming the molecular structure of the bean to create all these different flavors. And that's where we get a lot of the acidity and the sweetness, the caramelization is taking place. And I don't think there was enough time for that to happen here with this roast. So I would say that this probably needs to be closer to 38% time percentage for the brown phase. And so if I'm adding 7%, I'm probably going to take at least 5, maybe all of it, and take that away from the dry phase. So that's going to put my dry phase at around a 43%-ish profile that I'm going to want, and then the longer middle phase, and then I'm going to leave my development 18.5%, about the same. Maybe I'll go a little bit longer on that. So did the popper do what it was supposed to do? Well, it definitely browned the coffee. I've got some pictures here. You can take a look at them so you can see the beans, and the roast was a little bit inconsistent in the color, and I think it was JC Knives mentioned, and a couple others have mentioned that they use a lighter load. I'm doing 100%. I'm using the maximum capacity for this roaster, and they say to go a little bit lighter, and then my roast color will be a little more consistent. And that makes sense. If you take a look at the beans, the grinds, you'll see that there's a little bit of inconsistency in the grind as well. I had a few beans on the outside that were a little darker, and some that were kind of light, and so you'll see that variation. I think I did get roasted through the bean. The roast obviously wasn't too fast, so the roast wasn't underdeveloped. But yeah, so I think what I need to do is just lengthen that middle phase, and I think we'll have a much better result. I think on the next roast, I have a thermometer that's designed to, it has like a probe that you can connect to the thermometer. I'm going to see if I can put that inside the roaster because I'm curious to see what's happening to the temperature variations. One of the things that professional roasters are very conscious of is temperature variations and inconsistencies. So that rate of rise that's bouncing all over the place, they want to avoid that. They want to have a consistent rate of rise that's declining. We're not going to get that here on the air popper. It's a different type of roasting. Plus, we're not hooked up to Artisan to really be able to manage that. So the best thing that we can do is to try to have at least consistent temperatures. And when that heat, when this roaster gets hot and then shuts off, because I think that's a thing people have been telling me about, then that is not going to help us in our flavor profile. So we want to be careful of that. I hope this information has been helpful for you. The popper has been a lot of fun. I'm still going to do a couple more roasts with it. And then I'll kind of lay my final thoughts on what I think about the roaster. A lot of you have been putting a bunch of roasts under your belt, and you're saying you're getting some great results, and that's awesome. For me, this is a new experience. The air roasting is a newer experience for me. I have roasted on a hot air popper, but that was years ago. I've been drum roasting now for quite a few years, and so this has been a lot of fun, a lot of interesting scenarios, things have happened, and I'm using that as a learning experience. So thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you the next time here at the Virtual Coffee Lab, and I hope you have a great week roasting. We'll see you next time.